2007 Hyundai Santa Fe door locking problem. We're gonna end up changing the door lock mechanism because when you try to engage the lock, most of the time the driver's side doesn't do anything. You can feel it thump, and once in a while it does work. It's trying, so I know there's power and stuff. It's just we're gonna end up stripping the door panel loose and changing this lock mechanism that I got off of eBay for $28. Driver's side and passenger side are the same except for, driver's side front is the same as driver's side rear, except for the rear one has a child lock thing on here. So you can go to eBay and buy a whole new lock mechanism. You can do this yourself. It's not a big deal. You're just going to need a few tools. I like a piece of cardboard so I can sit while I'm taking the door panel off. You're going to need a little tape to hold the window up, some tape to hold some wires, a pointy thing to knock out some plastic deals so you can access some screws, a small pointy Phillips, a large pointy Phillips, something to mark where these two cables go, something to cut some tape. You're going to need a T20 Torx driver and a 10mm socket. Doesn't matter what size of drive. I like a 1/4" drive with a 1/4" socket so I can put the T20 right in there. And either a couple of small zip ties or just a piece of wire and a way to cut those. Okay, you start by putting the window down all the way because this whole thing is going to lift off and it's easier to come over the lip here with the window down. And you got some screws, which is why you got the pointy thing. You gotta reach up in here and knock this little plastic thing out of the way, which exposes a screw, which looks like that. So you got one there, one under a little plastic shield there. There's one there and one there. You come in here and take this thing out, and then you take your pointy thing, stick it up here at the top of the door, and pop that loose, get that out of the way. And you can, sorry with the color here, you can take the wire plug loose right here. And then down at the bottom of the door, there's a little slot right there. You can stick your pointy thing or any flat screwdriver in there and start popping the little door keepers. And there's, I don't know, 5 or 6 kind of all the way around. There's a few. Don't worry, you're gonna break some off, so what? Once that's loose, you're gonna lift the door assembly up off the windowsill. Okay, up here in this corner, you stick your pointy thing into that corner to help get it up off, but you're pulling the whole door up off the sill, which then exposes a bunch of wires. No big deal, they're all quickie click kind of things. Just go on in there and disconnect the door panel from all the wire plugs. Next. Okay, next thing you do is you pop out both of these plugs, put the door panel back up here and hook this plug back up so you can get the window to wind up about halfway to where you see these 2 bolts line up in the center, because you're going to unbolt those. Also, notice I've marked the black cable comes to the bottom hole, the gray is the top hole, and the reverse up here. So mark on the door so you don't get these backwards. Just make it easier for you. And while you're in here, every place you see this red tape, you use your blade to cut that. That's why you got some black tape, because you're going to put that back on later. So you're going to take all these wires off, because this silver panel, next is you're going to take this row of bolts loose. And you're also going to remove the 3 screws that hold this thing on, and remove, you'll figure it out if you look at this thing a little bit, you'll figure out how to get the cables out of this thing. Okay, so next is, I used my pointy thing to pull these rubber deals loose, I've taken the bolts out of the windows, and these are little clamps that are fairly tight, so you don't pry in there with a tool. You stick your hand in there and kind of wiggle things a little bit, and the window will fall out of the, it's kind of a slotted thing, so when you take the bolts loose, you're going to pull the window all the way up and tape it all the way up so it can't fall back into your way. So you got all the wires, all the red things are cut loose, including the one going up to the mirror. All the clips are loose. You're ready to take the silver panel loose next. I got the panel loose, got all the wires loose, so I got plenty of wiggle room on the panel, including the one I forgot on the window winder. And as you pull this thing down carefully, I'll show you later where these three things stick into that thing. You gotta be careful because they're pretty chintzy plastic, so you kind of work it, the steel panel this way and kind of up and down a little bit till they release, and then you're going to push them rubber things back through the hole, and hopefully you can see that wire plug in. Let's see here. You see that wire plug in on the bottom? That's the electric door locker thing. Now you're going to reach in there and unplug that thing as well. It's real difficult to get enough access to get in there to that plug. So I've taken my Torx and got the 3 Torx bolts out of the way, which made the latch loose. And I reached my hand up in behind, sort of like that, behind the silver panel, and got a screwdriver. That's a little clippy thing. I'll show you in a second. A little clippy thing to pull the wire off of it, so you can wiggle it just enough to get in there. The wire thing plugs in right there, so you see that little latch? You got to get something in there and get the hoop over that little catch thing. That's what I got, a little pointy thing. Now you're looking at this stuff. Don't worry if you lose anything down the door, like sockets or little screws. Just put a magnet in there, you'll get it. Now you got to get the door handle loose, and that means this thing first. Once you get that loose, then the door handle slides off this way and pulls right out. Okay, to get this thing loose, you take the little plug out, and you'll see one little screw in there. You get the screw out. Don't worry if you lose it. You'll get it later. Once you get the little screw out, give her a few wiggles with the screwdriver. This thing will pull out. Okay, once that thing is pulled out, the door handle just pops loose. Okay, and then you work on this screw next. Okay, so you can better see how the whole mechanism falls out of the door at that point. It's from the outside. Okay, there's a little screw hole you saw through the wheel. You pull this thing loose. Okay, and then the door handle from the outside slides off that way, and you just pull it out. Once you do that, you're left with one screw there, little tiny Phillips, and then the whole works comes out. Be very careful with this stuff. It's all cheap plastic. I see it's meant to flex a little bit. You're going to now transfer some of this stuff onto your new door latch. Door latch in hand. There's a little clip right there, and the same little clippy right there. A little pointy thing to separate them. Give them a little bit of, I'll do it with one hand. You'll see this whole thing will slide off like this. Once you get that piece off, then you work on the little ball and the clamp in the manila colored plastic thing. You'll figure it out. Just push the little clamp loose in the plastic thing, and then the ball will pop out. And you're ready for reassembly. Okay, maybe this makes better sense. You're gonna push that thing out of the slot, and then you'll figure out how to get the ball out of the thing. But to access this, you might spread the ears just enough and pull them off the pin so you can get in there and see all this stuff. You put the screw in, put the handle in. Here's a bit tricky now. On the inside, picture's not going to show pretty well. That little ball has to be under the door latchy thing. So you got to work it a little bit, maybe even help it by pushing the top of this back a little bit so you can slide the door handle that way. Okay, so maybe you can see the latch thing I'm talking about. The little ball thing has to be under the door handle, and this slides over top. That's the door handle, that's the latchy thing. And once you get that in, then you just cram this thing in. Remember that little hole? Okay, I'm just gonna stick it in there until it flushes up and put the screw back in there. Don't worry if you lose it. I've lost it 10 times. You get a magnet down in there and fish it out. You'll get it. Part of all is when you put the steel panel back on, there's 3 fingers to that plastic nonsense that sticks into 3 slots you see there. So I left those 3 screws loose. I wiggled the steel panel in place best I could. I didn't push anything hard. It finally went together. And you test it by moving the cables back and forth, latching the latch back and forth, pulling the handle. You'll get it. Just go slow, try. Put both whole bolts back in the window and put the holes back up, and then use some tape to restrap the harness to where it was supposed to be, and then you mount the handle with the 3 screws. Panel back on, including this thing. It all pops back on. Don't forget that screw in there. Put the whole thing back on. It's supposed to not allow you to lock the door. You try to lock the door. There you go. That's what it's supposed to be. Key on and the door open. You try to lock the door, it'll throw itself back open. Even if you try it manually. That's what it's supposed to do.